My name is Hank Meals. This show is about bedrock mortars. If you're not sure what they are, you will know by the end of this presentation. Okay. Now, these are bedrock mortars at Lake Olympia in Grass Valley. This has been made into a pool, which is no longer there as well. But the bedrock mortars were there far before, probably thousands of years before the pool was built. I just want to say that this presentation is not a science project or a study that I'm reporting on. Rather, it's the observation of a guy who's been here for 55 or so years, who's worked lots of woodsy jobs, including 25 years as an archaeologist. I also am a hiking fanatic, so I walked all this stuff. I have seen thousands of bedrock mortars, and now that I no longer work as an archaeologist, I can just respond to these like I do, which is in more than a scientific capacity. I want to say also that these lands that you'll see today are lands that originally belonged to the Nisinan, Concal, Mountain Maidu, and Washoe at the time of contact with the Western world. The lands were stolen from them, and their population was reduced by disease, ecocide, and violence. The plus side is they're still here. As a matter of fact, on the other side of this building is the Ubaseo Nisinan Art Gallery. So we talk about bedrock mortars. These have been, bedrock mortars is a term that's used since I first started working for the Forest Service back in 1975. That's the term we used, and it's still used up to now, except that academia has changed to bedrock milling stations now. Which is more accurate probably because it's more focused, but it's new and abstract sounding outside of academia. What everybody, you could talk to any old timer around here, and they have always called them Indian grinding rocks, including indigenous people. There's even Grinding Rock State Park in California. But it's surprising to me in such a fastidious profession as archaeology that they're not dealing with the fact that they're not used for grinding. They're used for pounding. Just a few days ago, I noticed that Yosemite, and that means the whole National Park Service, who sort of dictates archaeological policy, is now calling them Indian pounding rocks, which is actually the most accurate. A couple of definitions here. Prehistoric. About 30 years ago, I was talking to a group of indigenous farmers who were threatened by mining. And as I talked, I kept talking in archaeological jargon, one of the terms of which we use is prehistory. And afterwards, this Colombian farmer came up to me and said, prehistory? He said, I don't get it. All people have their history, you know. And that for me was mind-blowing, because we had like a built-in distancing from the people, putting them in this category. What we mean is pre-literate by this term, written history. Their history, which is oral, is no less valid, of course. But that was a real punch in the brain for me that helped me a lot. And then the other quote, to be native is to a place, we must speak its language, is by Robin Wall Kimmerer, who wrote Braiding Sweetgrass. She's a scientist, she's an authority on mosses, and she's also a Potawatomi Indian. And that's just something to think about. Bedrock mortars are there in all seasons. Another term is hunter and gatherer. The prevailing picture is people wandering around and hoping for to find some food. But it's a woefully inadequate term because it implies that seasonal availability of plants in a variable environment like the Sierra Nevada foothills contributes to a mobile rather than sedentary lifestyle. The use of 2 or more life zones or biological communities is typical. It would be a mistake to think of the seasonal hunting and gathering cycle as a necessary drudgery. There were ceremonial and social activities during every season at traditional gathering places, and they were trading destinations as well. Both planned and spontaneous social encounters can be joyful events where alliances are reaffirmed, food shared, there's singing and dancing, stories are retold, and ceremonies observed. So campsites with BRMs that you find in remote locations can be seen as mobile settlements. BRMs is bedrock mortars. BRMs are an investment in the landscape. If a setting is viable, any extra effort is clearly worth it. This kind of landscape is revisited and becomes a persistent place. As it is used repeatedly, it eventually becomes more proprietary. Hunting and gathering, which turns out to be damn specific and sophisticated. That's one of the things that working project to project as you do in archaeology, you get into that's an incremental view. But as you back off, and I walk the whole watershed as often as I can, you begin to see patterning, you begin to see there at every elevation, there also where oaks are not, because it's so closely linked at this point with acorn processing. And it's the most ubiquitous archaeological feature in California. We're still gathering. This image on the right over here is a place I talked about earlier, Grinding Rock State Park near the town of Volcano. I think it's off of Highway 4. But at this park, there are over 1,000 mortar holes on this rock, some of them with petroglyphs around the exterior. This really was the beginning of even recognizing them on site records. You go out and you fill out a site record and talk about what's there. They found this in the early 60s, and then the Office of Historic Preservation started making forms that had asked questions about bedrock mortars, mostly measurements. Not only were they collecting acorns, like I mentioned, they find them were above the where the oaks grow, and you're seeing women gathering seeds of all sorts, mostly grass seeds. Now on the right, you'll see women indeed pounding and not grinding. That's pretty explicitly portrayed there. On the left these are two culture bearers. Sometimes indigenous people don't want to share with you, but other times some just have a different perspective and do want to share with you. On the left is Lizzie Enos, who lived over in Clipper Gap in the Meadow Vista area over between North Fork of the American and the Bear River. She died in the 60s, but while she was alive, she was very involved with various universities with getting things straight rather than imagining or consulting people who don't know what they're talking about. On the right is Julia Parker, who's still alive in her 90s now. She worked for many years with Yosemite. She's been around here. She demonstrates the making of the acorn meal process. She must have answered the same questions thousands and thousands of times, but she remains cheerful, authoritative, just a real pleasure to be with. Here we go again. That's pounding, that is not grinding. And here you see how the pounding is done. This is Lizzie Enos' hands on the left. You have mortars of different depths, and you create a mix, like a paste on the dry side, that's maybe 1/8 of an inch thick, and that's lining the mortar hole. And then you're feeding on top of that kernels or the nuts, the acorns. And then as you pound down, you're not ever hitting rock to rock. That would be literally in bad taste. You just can't have rocks in you can't have chunky acorn meal. I'm very strict about that. On the right is Julia Parker. There's a process, there's tannic acid in the acorn meal that makes it bitter, so it has to be leached out. And traditionally that was done in a depression with like cedar boughs in the bottom, and the meal was put in there, and then water is added to leach the tannic acid out, and it keeps testing it till it reaches the desired taste. Here's a brush on the left made from a soaproot plant that's used routinely as like a kitchen tool for taking the acorn out of the mortar. And on the right is a drawing of how they were cooked. The rocks are heated and then dropped into baskets, and then you have another kind of implement that keeps stirring the rock around until it starts to bubble and it's cooked. So they were actually cooked in baskets. I liked Ishi's description of knowing when the acorn meal is ready, because it goes puka puka. And that's true. As I use that today for my cream of wheat. Here's an update on it's been over 100 years, just about 100 years, when people have stopped using the bedrock mortar and switched to something a little easier to use, like this grain grinder. But I just want to give a little shout out to the quality of tools. There's something about these hand tools that is so satisfying to hold. It is not like click-clacking away at your computer. You pick that up, you want to go to work. It's amazing, and it's quite sophisticated. It has a rounded top. This is just considered a milling tool. On the other side, the bottom side, it's flatter. On the left side, you can see it's battered and shaped for sort of lightweight pounding. And on the other side, it's rounded. So it's like a Swiss Army knife of sorts. And for scale, you can see the size of it based on that pine needle. Here are a few apparent archaeologists feel that the portable mortars preceded the bedrock mortars. And these are portable, an assortment of baskets that go with the process. That's hardly portable, that weighs a lot. Same with this. This was in the road, and it's more like a grinding slick, the one on the right here, for finer grains like grass seeds. So we've emphasized the role of bedrock mortars in acorn processing, but it was not restricted to that. I mean, one of the things, you'll find them alongside of the water, because things, in addition to the salmon run, you could take the salmon vertebrae, and you could do this with meat pieces too, and pound them in here, and then with a little bit of water, creating something that you can dry by a fire, and it becomes like a food you can take with you when traveling. Here we go. We've all made the assumption, again, for years, that the deeper the mortar, the longer it's been used. That's a function of wear. But as it turns out, Helen McCarthy, an anthropologist in 1985, in doing a study, talking with a group of Mono women, that she found out that no, the different depths have very distinctive purposes. So a starter mortar, which is also used for small seeds, is only about 1.5 inches deep. The one that does most of the processing, where you're going to be pounding, is 4 to 6 inches. And then anything beyond 7, they're not rigid about these numbers, this is ballpark numbers. But the really deep ones are used for like cattail roots, any number of things, plant materials. But that was a mind blower, because it just woke people up to still another assumption that you don't even know you're making. And I like this caveat at the bottom. It's advisable to approach, you can't apply it to everything, to approach the study of BRM technology as an aspect of ecological inheritance specific to a particular region. What that means is that may not really apply up here, so don't use it religiously, just use it in terms of an insight. Black oak acorns, preferred. Acorns were a trade item. You may have noticed, if you get around a lot in our ecosystems, that around Camptonville and parts of the Middle Fork, there's a concentration of tan oak, which you won't see in other places. So them Just like we need avocados, they need acorns that taste different. So it was probably a trade item that the people of Camptonville and that region had a monopoly on. Here are a couple of books to recommend. Uti, this is interviews and photographs of Lizzie Enos, who we saw earlier. This is a gorgeous book. It's really hard to find. It was done in 1971. It's not scientific. Richard Simpson's family inherited a village site. They had a homestead there. It's up near Meadow Vista. And he has created a very beautiful book with text by Lizzie Enos. It's just a simple, elegant book. The one on the right is Julia Parker. Now this one is a great handbook if you're going to do it yourself, if you want to know about present-day processing, step by step. It's very good. It's light reading. It's a wonderful book. And then here's one that just came out 2 years ago that it's hard to find too, and I'm not sure why. But it's a vocabulary that goes with the acorn processing. So it's just maybe 100 words, a couple hundred words that have to do with the acorn mush making process. Acorn storage. Now the acorn woodpecker's been into this for a long time. And they'll have thousands. They spend their lifetimes caring for their acorn stash. The wonderful thing for the indigenous people is it's a food that can be stored, which is a big deal, especially in late winter. Here's a Miwok woman at Yosemite, and these are their acorn granaries. These are both called granaries, the biological version, the cultural version. Other seeds that are eaten, this is gray pine down at the lower elevation, say below 1,500 feet around here. And they're very easy to climb because they don't grow in the standard conifer triangular fashion. They have lots of branches going out in different directions. When people came over on the Emigrant Trail and they were coming down from Bear Valley to Camp Far West, they saw numerous gray pines with snags and large branches on a 45-degree angle up into a crotch. It's a way that the indigenous people would go up and gather these. And they're pretty good. I have a friend who has collected all the kinds of seeds, and we've tried them out. Some are better than others. Here's a really good one, the sugar pine. The sugar pine up much higher, and archaeologists are beginning to see that possibly some of the bedrock mortars up at higher elevations, say above 2,500 to 3,000 and above, are specifically, almost specifically, for the collection of sugar pine. The amazing thing is how few sugar pine we have left here, because we've really been treated to an immense amount of logging. They can live from 300 to 500 years. We aren't going to see a 500-year-old sugar pine around here. An enormous tree. Best nuts found in the cones of the oldest trees, and these taste like filberts. They're good. Grasshopper Drive, grasshoppers and invertebrates in general, like say like underground hornet nests are full of honey and royal jelly. The grasshoppers, a complete protein, and it was really valued as a food. In Oaxaca today, you can buy grasshoppers at the market mixed with a little bit of chili. Quite good. Other on the right are manzanita berries, a very refreshing drink, not fermented. On the left are there are a lot of plants that have bulbs, and they're sort of in the onion family, and they're very good. They're called geophytes. At higher elevations, on the left, you're looking at mule's ears, above, say, 5,000 feet. And they're a relative of the sunflower, so they have a seed. And behind them is chinkapin, which also has a seed that's edible. On the right is something that's not a food, but a medicine. It's mugwort, and it's used for various ailments, as well as it's the local version of sage in terms of being used as a smudge. Salmon, you know, I've thought about this a million times. It must have been an immense event when the salmon came upstream and died, and with bear, raccoon, eagles, humans, everybody feasting, getting a nutritious blast. That cycle as part of this biosystem just must have been fabulous to behold and to taste. Now here's the #1 trade item, and it's salt, roasted salt. This guy collected it in 1876, one of the few people who bothered to write any notes or collect anything from the Nisenan people. I know of one little salt spring that's a tributary of Wolf Creek in Grass Valley. And I know there was a big one in Rockland, it was a big deal as a trade item, the #1 item. Other items, part of the hunter and gatherer cycle. Here's willow on the left and redbud on the right, both very useful for basketry. I mean, when archaeology, you're seeing none of that when you look backwards. You're only seeing stone tools. The whole realm of basketry and netting was just a huge aspect of the culture, but we can only imagine how, what a big deal it was. Here are pestles at a friend's place. Some are very fancy, and others are kind of crude. We're left with the crude ones because collectors, if you have a long cylindrical piece and it's flat on the bottom and it has on one end a bevel, on the other end a pestle, it's very interesting, and you need it for your mantelpiece. And they leave behind these, which are just as functional. Here's one that's a little fancier, pestle on the right-hand side. That's a beautiful bevel underneath. It's rounded on the top. It's another one of those multi-useful tools. I don't know how many times people will tell me, oh, we found a mortar and we found the pestle in it. Well, I think you're naive if you think that nobody has that nobody has moved that pestle in 1,000 years or so. When I go out with somebody and there's a pestle lying around and there's one of these, the first thing people will do is run and get it and put it in there. So, I mean, given all the miners who've been every place around here, it's highly unlikely that you're finding that. You can see it's a pretty close fit, and it just might be, but it's not the kind of thing you could say for sure that that's. And then there's single mortars. Most of the mortars you find are in a group, which right away implies there's a big social dimension to this. And there is. But these single mortars, you wonder, do they have a specific purpose? This one on the left is found over at Chalk Bluff, and the one on the right is on the South Yuba, about 6 miles up from Washington. The one on the right, what you can't see, and many of these things are impossible to photograph, you could see in those rocks between the river and this single mortar that they have kind of a slope to them. Well, behind this mortar is a big tall rock that forms a cove, like where you might expect the Virgin to appear. I mean, it's quite amazing. I'm just saying that the setting is so much a part of this, and we're only, you can't get hung up on minutia. I don't know that's certain either. Here, this is the latest acquisition of Bear Yuba Land Trust, the Wildflower Walk. It used to be Hell's Half Acre. But the amazing thing about that is this meadow that fills with flowers in the spring is on a very thin serpentine soil, which makes for plants growing there that don't grow in other places, many of which had medicinal value. So this was more of a pharmacy than a food store. If you put those factors together, you can see that. Again, here's another alludes to medicine. This is in Nevada City, the Medicine Rock. I've been up on top of that. There's a couple depressions that are big enough for somebody to lay down in, but there are a few bedrock mortars up there too. And the only reason we call that a Medicine Rock is because Louis Kelly, the last headman around here, Nisinan, who's now dead, said that's what this was used for, a healing rock. Now, again, just alluding to netting, this is a drawing done in 1852, and you can, nets were a big deal. They were used for rabbit drives, for waterfowl. You pit them up like a volleyball net on the edge of a pond, and you scare the birds and they fly into it. They're just fishing, obviously. It was just a huge part of the culture. And they were so valued. For instance, the rabbit drive nets were pretty bulky and long. They were inherited. Just a valuable piece of equipment and totally perishable. Now this will give you, this is over near Collins Reservoir in the spring, and there was a seasonal event called Weda, or the flower time in the spring. You're literally celebrating the spring. Not only is there this immense beauty that stretched out for miles and miles, but each one of these beautiful flowers is like a flag denoting where if you come back in the fall and you dig at our roots, you'll have wild onion, you'll have camas, etc. So, and same with medicine. But it was a wonderful time. If I could come back in that fantasy about coming back at any particular time, I would like to be around for this event, because the parties just went on and on. Here Lizzie Enos talks about from all over they come. And when that dance ends, maybe it was here or down in Auburn then, pretty soon they have another one up there at Colfax. Then from there, maybe next 10 days, they have another flower dance over to Grass Valley in Nevada City. Every camp have to have that flower dance in spring. And they're all in slightly different ecosystems, so that when you're through with one, you go to the next. It just sounds like a wonderful time of year. And part of that is social. Again, here's an event up at North Columbia Schoolhouse, and they're playing the hand game, which is a combination of gambling and magic and power. So we have, as of the late 60s, we had NEPA and CEQA, National Environmental Protection Act, and California Environmental Protection Act. And under that, in addition to protecting biology, streams, etc., archaeological sites were also protected. They were called cultural resources. And so here's the way in the draft general plan of the city of Rockland, they say, common prehistoric resources found in the area are bedrock mortars. Typically, mortars don't represent a unique occurrence and are not considered significant resources due to lack of research potential. Now, with something, there's a process you determine whether something is significant. Ultimately, possibly eligible for the National Register, and there's strict criteria for evaluating all that. But here, they're just making a blanket statement that bedrock mortars are not considered significant due to research potential. But that's not true if you're Native American. For one thing, what they represent today, they are the last remnants of that hunting and gathering lifestyle that was around for thousands of years, and actually they shaped habitat for centuries to suit themselves. They even shaped habitat for animals, like indirectly. For instance, if you have a field of manzanita, you burn it because the deer can hardly access anything but the periphery of the brush field for browse. If you burn it, the following year you get browse that's maybe 1-2 inches high, that's perfect and highly nutritious. So they're creating habitat for the deer, which they also use. The same thing goes for fish. You can get little bundles of willows, tie them together, stick them in stream banks, and those will grow up and create enough shade to change the temperature to keep the habitat for fish the way they need it. So it's sophisticated. It's simple on the surface, but really smart. So back to this research potential business. This is something that most archaeologists are doing because they work for mostly agencies or doing cultural research management more than archaeology. Oh, wrong direction, sorry. Bedrock Mortars again. Here's the criteria I talked about that, you know, blah, 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 for it to be considered significant. A is broad patterns of history, say the Civil War. Persons that are associated with the lives of significant persons, Abe Lincoln, and another one is embody distinctive characteristics of the work of a master, etc., something sensational of itself. And number D, letter D, that have yielded or may be likely to yield information important in prehistory or history, research potential. Well, I don't think Indians talk that way, for the most part. Native Americans may feel that a bedrock milling feature is significant by its very nature and should be eligible for listing in the National Register, even if it lacks data potential. Well, this is a point that, this is like a nick point in having your EIR process if you're an investor, because this is going to slow you down because things have to be evaluated and they just want to be legal. So here's the science. You have to have a research design based on a theoretical context. Now look at these. The patch choice model, optimal foraging theory, niche construction theory, economic defensibility model, starch grain analysis. This is not a vocabulary or dialogue that most Native Americans use, placing them at a disadvantage in communicating with land management bureaucracies. What natives have is something called traditional ecological knowledge. Like most of the hunting, for instance, is not done with high-tech weapons. It's done with knowing animal habitat and behavior and just being very sophisticated about how to use that. Traditional ecological knowledge is a reciprocal or kincentric relationship with the ecosystem. In 2000, Enrique Salmon, an anthropologist of Tarahumara descent, described concentric ecology as the manner of which indigenous people view themselves as part of an extended ecological family that shares ancestry. That's quite different from the way we see the world. Here's a little quote from Ursula Le Guin. One way to stop seeing trees or rivers or hills only as, quote, natural resources is to class them as fellow beings, kinfolk. The cultural practices that accompany the traditional environmental knowledge of California Indians are more than common sense strategies for sustainability. These are expressions of indigenous cosmologies which center on belonging to the land. They've essentially inserted themselves into ecological processes in hunting and gathering. But that speaks for itself. The setting. Now, the setting is really important. In the beginning, you're just taking pictures of things and making maps, and you're not really addressing the setting, which can be rivers, ridges, streams, wetlands, meadows, or grasslands. where there might be cattails, seeds, roots, deer, fish, eels, grasshoppers, views that refresh, landscapes that are sacred, and more. There are often opportunities for social interaction, news, storytelling, dance, trade, gambling, ceremony, and more. And I like this last paragraph. For hunters and gatherers, occupancy or possession is based on sites and trails. Territories are conceived in terms of trails running through landscape and the views from and across it, and not necessarily by enclosed territorial boundaries. The Washoe had allowed people to trespass on their land, and the archaeologists called that phenomenon corridors of tolerated access. I call it courtesy, because you're going to confront that person and say, hey, you're on our land, and you're going to work out a deal. He's going to trade you a song, tell you some news you had no idea about. He's going to show you a technique of flint knapping that you didn't know about. You do a gift exchange, in essence, and it's all right. Here's the setting, for instance. This is a lovely place in Spenceville, and on that rock outcropping that you can see between the trees, there's a bedrock mortar with about 25 mortar holes, and I'm sure the setting as a whole and the look of it was not lost on the people who used it. Here's another gorgeous place. This is down around Indian Springs, near Penn Valley. At this place, there are a couple of springs, and there are 120 mortar holes in that area right there. Here's another shot of the same place. Here's another one. Now it begs some questions. I mean, obviously you could, if you have 20 mortar holes here, it implies this is a social place. You can see the kids playing out here, but also with 20 of them, you can't use 20 at once. You saw earlier how the women were sitting with their legs straight out and pounding. So there's some protocols here about what's to be used for what, when, by who. All of that has to be figured out, and I'm sure there are protocols about it. This is also in Spenceville, and it's on a open meadow right now, but that rock outcropping, and I'm sure at one time there was a large tree there providing shade. There's about 25 mortar holes there, but it's only about that high. It's only a couple inches above the grassland, which is growing over it. There may be even more to this behind. So these bedrock mortars are also part of a dynamic process. Often I've gone back to places and had to really search around to find the place I've been at before, or just have a hunch about it. I usually carry a trowel or a screwdriver and just poke around a little bit, and you can tell. So I wonder how many of these have gone underground, literally. Here's another place. This was all covered with duff, just had a hunch about it. It was right alongside of a stream. Sure enough, there's about 12 mortar holes right there. This is down around Hamilton, on the lower Yuba. Here's another one that, let me show you this next one. This one, this has about 30 bedrock mortars in it. Up. And you could see one season away how it's disappearing into the landscape again. There must be hundreds of them around that are below the surface. So when you talk about a place having good vibes, you may be onto something. So this is up near Washington. This is at Starvation Bar, which is a curious name because these people were obviously not starving. You could see all the bedrock mortars right alongside of the river, South Fork. And then here's up above, this is at least 6,500 feet. You can see that peak back there is Gibraltar, and that's on the Pacific Crest Trail. But there's a series of bedrock mortars here and petroglyphs with them. This is the same site. And here we go. On the left here, you could see this is kind of a small mortar. This is even smaller. And these areas here are areas that are smoothed out by use for smaller grass seeds. And sometimes something like this will be actually part of the technology here, draining water off of it. And these are petroglyphs at the same place. Now you don't know, the petroglyphs are made thousands of years before the bedrock mortars, but it's impossible to get a timeline on either one of these features. Here's one with bedrock mortars and a petroglyph site that was chosen because of the nature of its geology, the rock itself. Julia Parker has this cryptic comment in her book where she says, you had to be friends with the rock. Okay. As you look across the valley, you could see this gray rock, the only rock like that around. It's an iron ore called magnetite. This is the same stuff. And it's magnetic. I don't know if they had a way of determining that it's magnetic or not, but it had some appeal to them. And nearby, there are a few much smaller rocks of the same material that also have petroglyphs and bedrock mortars on them. So you can see this rock has particular significance. We don't know what it is. Now this is the North Fork of the American River off of Mooney Ridge, which is incredibly steep. And this is working our way down. And you have to ask yourself, why are there bedrock mortars here? Perhaps only for the sensational views. And these two, I've been to this place 3 times, and once there was a 2-year interval in between. This also has about 20 bedrock mortars. And this material here is soft like talc. And in a 2-year period, I went back and none of them were visible because it's soft and the wind just fills them up and blows it over. So here's another fading bedrock mortar site. This is in the same area. This is up above in a valley. You could see the slope. It's almost a 45-degree angle. It's mid-slope. This, it was on private property. We couldn't stay too long. But there are bedrock mortars here, 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 here. And then putting my hand down in there, there are 2 more levels within it with bedrock mortars in there. So there's something special about it, but we don't know what it is. And here's up Palisades Creek. This is a tributary of North Fork of the American. This is a petroglyph site with 1 bedrock mortar. You could see the archaeologists hovering nearby. There are 4 pads in here and 1 camera, so they've got it covered. Here's some of the petroglyphs at that site. Here's another one alongside the water again. This is on the North Fork of the Yuba, North Yuba, right at Cherokee Creek. And you could see the bedrock mortars. There are more. And I remember years ago, there were, there's another layer of bedrock mortars that's now underwater because the continued siltation that's coming down from mining activities and natural erosion has elevated the creek. So there's that too. And I do think that this shade of red had something to do with the choice as well. It's the only red rock around there. Here's again near Washington. These are all tailings over here. This is, you could see 1, 2, there are a few more here. And I remember standing here with a woman who was billed as an authority on the area around Washington. This is real close to the town. She had lived there 60 years or so and knew a whole lot. And we're standing there, and I said, do you find any Indian stuff around here? And she said, no, the Indians didn't come up this far. But they did. Down in Spencerville again on Dry Creek. Entirely different kind of habitat. These are almost all deep. They must have had something to do with some root crop or vegetable, I don't know. There are more questions than answers, as you can see. Here's up on Round Mountain, where they put a road in, and you can see here, this is completely flat, even though it's busted. And here's a milling stone right alongside of it. Most people drive over this daily and don't even see it's there. Then you may live on a site. There's some friends of mine out on Highway 174 digging a water line, come across all of this archaeological, all these findings. And what can you do about it? Well, people love to stack up their swag and show you how they live on a special place. That's just true. But what I recommend people do is when you find an artifact, map it. Build yourself a rough base map of your place and have a way of identifying it, a letter A and then a sketch or a photo of it, and then put it on the map, because the spatial arrangement, the relationship of these stones for different activities to each other has meaning. So that's a good way to do it. In fact, it really should go with the deed to the place, rather than these tools being given away to friends who take it away, and it's like tearing a page out of a book, actually. Here's a shot at Yankee Jim's over on by the North Fork of the American. This is 1899. You can see people with a basket full of shelled acorns, gathering basket. Here's an up-to-date use of a bedrock mortar for landscaping in Penn Valley. They just didn't want people driving on this little bit of vegetation here, so they propped up this rock. And it has about 5 mortar holes in it. Whether or not they know this is the case, I don't know. And then here's another one. There's a church outside of Grass Valley that has a fountain that has a rock with, here's a bedrock mortar right there. Now, Don Ryberg of the Chiacum Maidu around here went and confronted them about this and said, hey, you know, it's in bad taste is best. And they said, we didn't do it on purpose and we're not doing anything about it. So you can go see it yourself. Now this is probably the most outrageous cultural theft I've ever seen, where people are taking out big slices of bedrock mortars. This is up near Sweetland, which was a village site right behind Peterson's Corners up on San Juan Ridge. Now this from Round Mountain is looking out at what we're calling Sutter Buttes. Now they keep changing the name. Don't forget, this is not a written language, so whoever's pronouncing it has a slightly different spelling of it, but it's something like Eastumyani. To call them Sutter Buttes, according to Shelley Covert, spokesperson for the local Nisenan, her grandfather said it's simply not polite to call them that, Sutter Buttes. Here we go. And this is from their, from the Nisenan website, so I'm not interpreting a thing. These are bedrock mortars inside of Marysville Buttes. You notice they're not calling them Sutter Buttes either. They were called the Marysville Buttes, even though they're 15 miles from Marysville. Before they were called Sutter Buttes. They're sacred to the Nisenan people, being the source of all life and the place where your spirit would go after death. The base of the sacred mountain held an entrance with a gatekeeper who would either let your spirit in or turn it away to wander. On top of the sacred mountain was a large roundhouse. Here, newly deceased spirits would see their relatives who had died before them and have their first spirit food. The spirit would eventually take to the stars and make its path to the Milky Way. Here's another view from, it's the area around north of Marysville near Honcut Creek, but you're looking out and you see Eastumyani again. There's this business of the sacred landscape. It's a hard thing for planners and lawyers and contractors to grasp. But where does it end? I mean, if you can see something, and it's true, you can go to Tibet or any of those countries in the Himalayas, and they have in Andes, and they have sacred landscapes. And how do you do anything about that? How do you manage that? Just asking the question. This is a place where there are bedrock mortars and petroglyphs too. Now here's the former mining site of Hamilton in the Yuba gold fields. This is the area below where Highway 20 crosses the Yuba at Parks Bar. Below it you see all that gravel. That's all from hydraulic mining. It's 7 miles long, 2.5 miles wide at its broadest point. Hamilton, the mining period is over now, but now people are using it for, this kind of off-road activity. But how sacred a site is it now? I don't know. Those are Isumyami right back here. Here's another one that depicts the rhythm of a rainy winter and the valley becoming wetter and wetter, full of wetlands, so much so that the ungulates like elk, deer, and pronghorns are moving out because they have such small, narrow feet. They get out of this muddy area and come up slope, a rhythm that certainly the people in the foothills were well aware of because it makes for better hunting. And this is the farming area where they've again channeled the water and used it for irrigation purposes and planting of an entirely different crop. Most of the grassland that existed in the valley has been completely replaced, something like 90-some% of it, by introduced plants. Here's an event at Dry Creek, right where it comes into the South Yuba below, from the north from Collins Lake. You can see tailings from the mining operation. This is the Yuba River, and they're doing a ceremony here, calling back the salmon ceremony. This is Goodyear Aguilar and Simon Gelly. And the Indians are still here. And this is accurate. Here's the way I see it. Bedrock mortar sites on public land are a gift to all, whether found by happenstance or visited deliberately. They're places of renewal, places to enjoy, to learn, be still, or gain inspiration. Bedrock mortars function collectively as a monument to a people with concentric commitment to a place where they participated in traditional ecological processes since time began, by making the traditional cycles of visiting bountiful landscapes, conducting nurturing tasks, and performing ceremony. Perhaps the future can be assured. These sites have spiritual worth, but no monetary value, being priceless. Gifts are reciprocal. And there's this dimension of when you come upon them now, what do you get out of it? Do you see what I see? Do you see a large stone beast coming out of the earth with 2 eyes and nostrils? See how they're bisymmetrical? Like people will say, oh, that cloud looks like the Santa Maria ship that Columbus came over on. This is just one interpretation. You could see it like that. Here's a place on the North Fork of the American where I've seen over 50 bedrock mortar sites alongside the river get filled with gravel, and they're all beginning to disappear. There's about 10 or 15 left. But you could see, this is in January, you could see the bedrock mortars are full of ice. It doesn't get any, this particular place doesn't get any sunshine in the winter. Anyway, I love to go there and photograph it. It's just inspiring to me. Now here's a guy named Spencer Fong, who's an architect and an artist, who he's inspired by bedrock mortars. Here's another one of his paintings. Now this is a very interesting experience. A friend of mine, artist named Chris Timken. These are bedrock mortars. These are photos. How do I explain this? At night, they covered a bedrock mortar with a tarp. They slipped unexposed film, cut it a little bit into sort of circle, and put them in the bottom of the mortar holes. And then at night, pulled the tarp off and let the sky record on the film. She calls it not altogether successful, but I think it's a great investigation and a new view at the very least. This is just, we're wrapping up here, and I'm just putting this in. This is one of my favorite artists. He's a bohemian from the 1930s, 40s, who was a gifted linguist, and he lived with the people of Fall River and the Shasta region for years, and he wrote a book called Indian Tales that really gives a feeling for the lifestyle of the hunting and gathering, the anticipation of the next place you go to, talking about, ruminating about the last place you've been to, the different things you obtain in trade, different cultures you come across. Anyway, this is Coyote out for a walk. And that's about it on this one.